What if I told you that someone 2,600 years ago described Israel's rebirth in 1948 with impossible accuracy? Picture this. A Jewish priest in ancient Babylon receives a vision of scattered dry bones coming back to life, forming a vast army, and returning to their homeland. He calls it the restoration of Israel. The catch? Israel hadn't existed as a nation for over 2,500 years when this prophecy was fulfilled. This isn't just coincidence. It's statistically impossible. The year was 593 BC. The Babylonian Empire had just destroyed Jerusalem, burned Solomon's temple to the ground, and scattered the Jewish people across their vast territory. For any reasonable observer, this was the end. Nations that lost their homeland, their temple, their identity, they disappeared into history. The Assyrians had already wiped out the northern kingdom. Now Babylon finished the job with Judah. Yet in this darkest moment, a priest named Ezekiel recorded one of history's most precise long-term predictions. Ezekiel 37 describes a vision where God shows him a valley filled with dry bones, completely desiccated, scattered, seemingly lifeless for ages. Then God asks him a question that echoes across millennia. Can these bones live? What follows is a step-by-step description of national resurrection that matches Israel's modern restoration with stunning precision. First, the bones come together. Then sinews and flesh cover them. Finally, breath enters them, and they become a mighty army returning to their land. For over 2,000 years, this seemed like spiritual metaphor. Then, May 14, 1948 happened. After nearly 2 millennia of dispersion, persecution, and seeming extinction, Israel declared independence. The scattered bones had literally come together. The precision isn't just remarkable, it's mathematically impossible without supernatural foresight. We're talking about predicting the restoration of a nation that would remain non-existent for 2,500 years, through the rise and fall of Persian, Greek, Roman, Byzantine, Islamic, Ottoman, and British empires. But here's what makes this truly extraordinary. Ezekiel didn't just predict Israel's return. He described the exact process: gradual gathering, physical reconstruction, and spiritual revival happening in precise sequence. Modern Israel's establishment followed this pattern exactly. Jewish immigration, bones gathering, physical nation building, sinews and flesh, and ongoing spiritual awakening, breath entering. The statistical probability of this accuracy? Mathematically negligible. This isn't just prophecy, it's precision that demands investigation. Ezekiel chapter 37 opens with one of the most vivid scenes in ancient literature. God's Spirit transports Ezekiel to a valley filled with human bones. Not recently deceased, but ancient, completely dry, scattered everywhere the eye could see. The Hebrew word used is yabesh, indicating total dehydration, suggesting these bones had been exposed for decades or centuries. This wasn't a battlefield aftermath. This was the graveyard of a civilization. The prophet walks among these bones, overwhelmed by their number and condition. The text emphasizes they were very dry, in Hebrew, yabesh meod, indicating complete hopelessness from any natural perspective. Then comes God's challenge. Son of man, can these bones live? In context, this seems like asking whether a demolished building can reconstruct itself. Ezekiel's answer reveals both faith and realism. O Lord God, you know. What follows is prophecy as divine cinematography. God commands Ezekiel to prophesy to the bones, and as he speaks, supernatural reconstruction begins. First, noise and shaking as bones move toward each other. Bone to bone, in Hebrew, etzem el etzmo, suggesting precise, methodical assembly. Archaeological evidence from ancient Israel shows that Jewish burial practices involved gathering scattered bones into ossuaries, making this imagery particularly meaningful to Ezekiel's original audience. The sequence continues with scientific precision. After bones connect, sinews appear. The Hebrew gid refers specifically to tendons and ligaments that hold skeletal systems together. Then flesh, basar, covers the framework. Finally, skin, or, provides the outer covering. This isn't random description. It follows actual anatomical reconstruction order, as if describing modern forensic recreation or, remarkably, DNA-based resurrection techniques that wouldn't be discovered for millennia. But initially, there's no breath, no ruach in Hebrew, meaning spirit, breath, or life force. These perfectly formed bodies remain lifeless until Ezekiel prophesies to the breath itself, calling it from the four winds. The Hebrew arba ruachot suggests gathering life force from every direction, from global dispersion. Only then do these bodies become Chayil Gadol Meod, an exceedingly great army. The vision concludes with divine interpretation. These bones represent the whole house of Israel, not just Judah, but all 12 tribes. They're saying, our bones are dried up, our hope is lost, we are cut off completely. But God promises to open their graves, bring them up, and place them in their own land. The Hebrew Adamah specifically means ancestral soil, homeland earth. This isn't metaphor about spiritual resurrection. It's literal prophecy about national restoration after apparent extinction. Understanding why Ezekiel 37 seemed impossible requires grasping the catastrophic scale of Israel's destruction. This wasn't just military defeat, it was civilizational extinction by ancient standards. The Babylonian conquest of 586 BC represented the complete dismantling of Jewish national existence. Temple destroyed, priesthood scattered, monarchy ended, population deported, land resettled by foreigners. Historical records from Nebuchadnezzar's archives, discovered in modern Iraq, document the systematic nature of this destruction. The Babylonian Chronicle describes 3 separate deportations: 597 BC, royal family and nobility; 586 BC, general population; and 582 BC, remaining stragglers. Archaeological excavations at Tel Aviv near Babylon, led by Dr. Laurie Pierce, uncovered the Marashu archive, cuneiform tablets proving extensive Jewish settlement in Babylonia, complete with names, occupations, and integration into local economy. What made restoration seem impossible wasn't just distance or time, it was precedent. Ancient Near Eastern history showed that displaced peoples disappeared within generations. The Assyrians had perfected population transfer as a tool of permanent subjugation. When they conquered the northern kingdom in 722 BC, the 10 tribes vanished completely, becoming the lost tribes of Israel. Babylon applied similar techniques to Judah, expecting identical results. Contemporary ancient sources confirm this expectation. The Lachish letters, discovered by archaeologists, show Jewish commanders acknowledging impending extinction. Psalm 137, written during the exile, captures the despair. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat and wept when we remembered Zion. The Hebrew verb zakar suggests not just remembering, but trying to maintain cultural memory against overwhelming odds. From 586 BC to 1948 AD represents 2,534 years of statelessness, longer than most civilizations exist at all. During this period, Jews endured Roman persecution, Byzantine restrictions, Islamic dhimitude, medieval expulsions, crusade massacres, Inquisition tortures, pogrom violence, and finally, Holocaust extermination. Each generation seemed like it might be the last to remember Israel. Yet somehow, impossibly, cultural memory persisted across 127 generations. Professional historians studying ancient peoples emphasize how remarkable this preservation is. Dr. Simon Schama, Columbia University, notes that maintaining distinct identity without territorial base defies every known pattern of ethnic survival. Dr. Paul Johnson, in A History of the Jews, calculates that probability of maintaining coherent ethnic identity through such dispersion approaches statistical impossibility. Yet not only did Jewish identity survive, it maintained specific connection to the ancestral homeland Ezekiel prophesied they would reclaim. The 19th century witnessed something unprecedented in human history. A stateless people, scattered across continents for over 2,000 years, began systematically returning to their ancestral homeland. This wasn't random migration. It followed the exact pattern Ezekiel described. First, scattered bones began gathering. The Hebrew phrase, bone to bone, etzem el etzmo, suggests methodical, purposeful assembly, which precisely describes early Jewish immigration to Ottoman Palestine. The first Aliyah, 1882-1903, brought primarily Russian Jews fleeing pogroms. Archaeological records from this period, preserved in the Central Zionist Archives, show systematic land purchases in precisely the regions Ezekiel mentioned: the mountains of Israel, the ancient territories of Judah and Israel. These weren't random settlements. Early Zionists deliberately chose locations with biblical significance, as if unconsciously following prophetic blueprints. Dr. Derek Penslar of Harvard University has documented how early Jewish settlers displayed remarkable knowledge of ancient geography. Groups like Hovevei Zion purchased land in areas that aligned with biblical tribal territories, despite having no modern maps or archaeological surveys. It's as if collective memory preserved geographical details across millennia, guiding returnees to precisely the locations Ezekiel prophesied would be resettled. The Second Aliyah, 1904-1914, established kibbutz settlements that followed ancient agricultural patterns. Archaeological surveys by Israeli universities have revealed that many kibbutzim were built on foundations of ancient Jewish settlements, often without modern founders knowing the historical precedent. The Hebrew University's Institute of Archaeology has mapped over 200 cases where modern Jewish settlements coincide exactly with ancient Jewish sites. But the restoration wasn't just geographical, it was linguistic. Hebrew, dead as a spoken language for over 1,100 years, began revival through Eliezer ben Yehuda's efforts. Linguists consider successful resurrection of a dead language virtually impossible. Yet Hebrew not only revived, but became the primary language of a modern nation. The Hebrew Language Academy has documented how this linguistic restoration followed biblical grammar patterns Ezekiel would have recognized. World War I provided the political framework for restoration through the Balfour Declaration, 1917, which officially recognized Jewish national aspirations in Palestine. Dr. Jonathan Schneer of Georgia Tech has shown how this declaration emerged from complex geopolitical calculations that seem to align mysteriously with ancient prophetic timelines. The British Empire, at its peak, essentially endorsed Ezekiel's vision of Jewish restoration to their homeland. The Holocaust represents the most literal fulfillment of Ezekiel's vision imaginable. 6 million Jews, 1/3 of world Jewry, systematically murdered, their bodies often reduced to ash, scattered across Europe like dry bones in a vast valley of death. The Hebrew word, yabesh, completely dried up, took on horrifying new meaning. Yet from this ultimate destruction came the catalytic force for national restoration. Nazi documentation, preserved in archives across Europe, shows the systematic nature of Jewish destruction. The Wannsee Protocol outlined plans for final solution, complete extinction of European Jewry. SS Oberfuhrer Adolf Eichmann's transportation records, discovered at Yad Vashem, document the methodical collection and murder of Jewish communities from across Europe. This wasn't random violence. It was coordinated attempt at complete ethnic extinction. The camps themselves resembled Ezekiel's Valley. Survivors' testimonies, collected by USC Shoah Foundation, consistently describe vast areas filled with human remains. Primo Levi's Survival in Auschwitz describes mountains of bones and ash covering entire landscapes. The Hebrew phrase, etzem yabesh me'od, very dry bones, gained literal meaning in places like Birkenau, where crematoria processed thousands daily. Yet exactly as Ezekiel prophesied, the bones began to live. Dr. Michael Berenbaum of USC has documented how Holocaust survivors became primary driving force behind Israel's establishment. Displaced persons camps in Europe witnessed remarkable phenomenon. People who had lost everything, families, homes, communities, began organizing for Palestinian immigration with supernatural determination. The Brika movement, led by Holocaust survivors, organized illegal immigration to Palestine. British intelligence reports, declassified in 1980s, show amazement at survivors' persistence despite overwhelming obstacles. People who should have been psychologically destroyed by trauma instead displayed unprecedented determination to reach their ancestral homeland. The Hebrew word, chayil, army, perfectly describes these survivor immigrants. Statistical analysis by Dr. Yehuda Bauer of Hebrew University reveals impossible demographic recovery. Jewish population, which should have taken generations to recover from Holocaust losses, rebounded within decades through combination of survival, immigration, and natural increase. The mathematical models suggested Jewish population wouldn't return to pre-war levels until 2010. Instead, Israel alone exceeded pre-Holocaust European Jewish population by 1970. The timing aligns perfectly with prophetic framework. Ezekiel describes resurrection process, bones gathering, then sinews connecting, flesh covering, skin forming, and finally breath entering. Holocaust represented complete desiccation, the very dry bones phase. But immediately afterward, gathering began on unprecedented scale, leading directly to national restoration. On May 14, 1948, at 4 p.m. Tel Aviv time, David Ben-Gurion declared Israel's independence. The Hebrew phrase he used, Hanukkah Medinat Yisrael, literally means the dedication of the State of Israel, echoing temple dedication ceremonies from ancient times. At that moment, Ezekiel's 2,554-year-old prophecy reached its climax. The breath entered the restored body, and the dry bones became a living nation. The circumstances surrounding this declaration reveal remarkable alignment with prophetic details. Ben-Gurion spoke from the Tel Aviv Museum, located on land that archaeological surveys show was inhabited by ancient Israelites. The timing, immediately before Sabbath, followed biblical patterns of new beginnings. The declaration itself quoted biblical promises, directly referencing the gathering of exiles that Ezekiel prophesied. The international response demonstrates the supernatural dimension of this restoration. United Nations records show that President Truman recognized Israel just 11 minutes after declaration, the fastest diplomatic recognition in modern history. Soviet recognition followed 3 days later, marking the only time during Cold War that superpowers agreed on major Middle East policy. This unprecedented unity seems beyond mere political calculation. The Hebrew word ruach, breath, spirit, manifested in multiple ways. The new nation immediately faced coordinated invasion by 5 Arab armies, with combined population exceeding Israel's by 40.1 and military resources by similar ratios. Military historians consider Israel's survival mathematically impossible, yet exactly as Ezekiel prophesied, the restored nation became Chayil Gadol Meod, an exceedingly great army. Dr. Martin van Creveld of Hebrew University has analyzed the 1948 Arab-Israeli War extensively. His statistical models show Israeli victory probability at less than 5%. Yet not only did Israel survive, it expanded territory beyond UN partition borders. The transformation from Holocaust victims to victorious army within 3 years defies conventional understanding of national development patterns. The demographic dimension is equally remarkable. Modern Israel's population includes representatives from every continent, speaking dozens of languages, yet unified by Hebrew, a language dead for 1,700 years that Ezekiel would recognize. The Central Bureau of Statistics documents immigration from over 100 countries, recreating the ancient 12 tribes structure in modern form. Archaeological evidence supports prophetic fulfillment in unexpected ways. Since 1948, Israeli archaeologists have uncovered extensive evidence of ancient Jewish presence throughout the land. The Israeli Antiquities Authority has cataloged over 30,000 archaeological sites from biblical periods. Each discovery confirms historical Jewish connection to precisely the territories Ezekiel prophesied would be resettled. The bones had returned to their original valley. Ezekiel's prophecy contains specific details that match modern Israel's development with stunning precision. The prophet describes restoration happening in stages. First physical gathering, bone to bone, then infrastructure development, sinews, followed by economic growth, flesh, cultural establishment, skin, and finally spiritual revival, breath. Israel's development since 1948 follows this exact sequence. The Hebrew phrase bone to bone, etzem el etzmo, suggests systematic methodical assembly. Israeli immigration records from the Central Bureau of Statistics confirm this pattern. The first wave gathered survivors and displaced persons. The second wave brought Middle Eastern Jewish communities. Operation Magic Carpet brought Yemenite Jews. Operation Exodus brought Soviet Jews. Each wave represented different bones of the scattered nation reassembling methodically. Ezekiel describes sinews, gid, appearing after bone assembly. In anatomical terms, sinews provide structural connection and movement capability. Modern Israel's infrastructure development follows this pattern precisely. Within decades, Israel built transportation networks, communication systems, and institutional frameworks connecting diverse populations into functional society. The Hebrew University's Department of Geography has mapped how modern infrastructure often follows ancient root patterns Ezekiel would recognize. The flesh, basar, phase represents economic substance and material prosperity. Israel's economic development from subsistence agriculture to high-tech powerhouse occurred with supernatural speed. In 1948, per capita GDP ranked among world's lowest. Today, Israel ranks among developed nations, with higher per capita GDP than most European countries. The transformation took 75 years, about 3 generations, matching biblical restoration timelines. Cultural establishment, skin, covering, represents external identity and international recognition. Modern Hebrew literature, art, music, and cinema have achieved international recognition. Israeli universities consistently rank among world's best. The Hebrew Language Academy has successfully modernized ancient Hebrew for contemporary use while maintaining biblical grammar patterns. This represents successful resurrection of complete cultural system. The breath, ruach, dimension, involves spiritual revival. Religious statistics show remarkable trends. Judaism's revival in Israel exceeds global averages, with synagogue attendance, religious education, and observance rates increasing across demographic groups. Simultaneously, Christian pilgrimage to Israel has reached historic highs, and archaeological discoveries continue revealing biblical period sites. The spiritual dimension of restoration is statistically measurable. Ezekiel also prophesies about agricultural restoration. The desolate land shall be cultivated. Modern Israeli agriculture has literally made deserts bloom. Satellite imagery comparing Ottoman period Palestine with modern Israel shows dramatic vegetation increase. Israeli agricultural technology now leads globally, with innovations in desert farming, water conservation, and crop development. The land itself has been restored exactly as prophesied. Ezekiel 38:39 describes massive military coalitions attempting to destroy restored Israel, providing another verification layer for the prophecy's accuracy. The prophet lists specific nations and regions that would oppose Israel's restoration, and identifies geographical and political conditions that wouldn't exist until modern times. This opposition isn't incidental. It's prophetic proof that restoration is authentic. The Hebrew names in Ezekiel 38, Gog, Magog, Meshech, Tubal, Persia, Cush, Phut, correspond to geographical regions that modern scholarship has identified with remarkable precision. Dr. Clyde Billington of Northwestern College has traced these names through ancient sources, showing they align with modern Russia, Iran, Turkey, and African nations that currently oppose Israel. The precision is archaeologically and linguistically verifiable. Ezekiel describes this coalition attacking Israel when it's gathered from many nations and dwelling safely. This perfectly describes modern Israel, immigrants from over 100 countries, yet paradoxically one of the world's most secure societies, despite constant threats. The Hebrew phrase, Yashav Labatash, suggests security despite apparent vulnerability, exactly Israel's current situation with advanced defense systems protecting small population. The prophet specifies this attack occurs when Israel has been brought back from the sword and is gathered from many peoples upon the mountains of Israel. Historical records confirm that Jewish communities worldwide have indeed been brought back from the sword, surviving persecution across continents and centuries. The mountains of Israel specifically refers to the hill country of Judea and Samaria, precisely the contested territories of modern Israel. Regional opposition to Israel's existence has followed Ezekiel's predictions exactly. The Arab League's founding charter explicitly calls for Israel's destruction. Iranian leadership regularly threatens Israel's annihilation. Turkish-Israeli relations have deteriorated as Turkey moves toward the Gog coalition Ezekiel describes. Russian involvement in Middle East affairs increasingly aligns with prophetic descriptions of Northern Coalition leadership. The military dynamics Ezekiel describes seem impossible from ancient perspective, but perfectly match modern warfare. He mentions horses and weapons that suggest mechanized armies, fire and brimstone that sounds like aerial bombardment, and divine intervention through natural disasters resembling modern defensive technologies. Israel's current military capabilities, including the Iron Dome system and advanced satellite surveillance, create defensive scenarios that align with Ezekiel's descriptions. The economic aspect provides additional verification. Ezekiel describes the attacking coalition seeking silver and gold, and cattle and goods. Modern Israel's economy, based on high technology exports and natural resource discoveries, including recent massive natural gas finds, makes it an economic target exactly as prophesied. The opposition proves the prophecy's authenticity by fulfilling predicted resistance patterns. Since Israel's restoration in 1948, archaeological discoveries have provided unprecedented confirmation of Ezekiel's historical accuracy. The prophet's detailed descriptions of ancient Israel, its geography, religious practices, and cultural patterns have been verified by thousands of excavations across the land. This archaeological revolution proves that Ezekiel wrote with intimate knowledge of historical Israel, validating his prophetic credentials. The discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, 1947 to 1956, provided manuscripts of Ezekiel dating to 200 BC, over 2,000 years old, proving the prophecy's antiquity. Dr. Emmanuel Tov of Hebrew University has confirmed that these ancient manuscripts match modern versions with 99.7% accuracy. The timing of this discovery, just before Israel's establishment, seems beyond coincidental. The scrolls validate both the prophecy's age and accuracy. Tel Aviv excavations, led by Tel Aviv University's Institute of Archaeology, have uncovered extensive evidence of Ezekiel's historical knowledge. The prophet's descriptions of Solomon's temple, Jerusalem's layout, and ancient Israelite religious practices match archaeological findings precisely. Dr. Israel Finkelstein's work at Megiddo and other sites confirms Ezekiel's detailed knowledge of pre-exilic Israel, validating his historical credibility. The discovery of the Tel Dan Stele, 1993, provided first non-biblical reference to the House of David, confirming the historical reality of biblical monarchy that Ezekiel claims God will restore. Dr. Avraham Biren's archaeological team found this Aramaic inscription mentioning the Davidic dynasty, proving biblical historical accuracy that extends to Ezekiel's restoration promises. Excavations at Khirbet Qeiyafa, led by Hebrew University's Yosef Garfinkel, have uncovered a fortified city from King David's time, complete with Hebrew inscriptions. These discoveries confirm the historical depth of Jewish connection to the land that Ezekiel prophesied would be restored. Carbon-14 dating places these sites in the 10th century BC, matching biblical chronology perfectly. The Pool of Siloam discovery, 2004, revealed the exact location where Jesus performed healing miracles, confirming Jerusalem's topography as described in biblical texts, including Ezekiel. Dr. Ronnie Reich's excavations showed that ancient Jerusalem's water systems matched biblical descriptions precisely, validating geographical knowledge preserved in prophetic texts. Recent discoveries continue confirming prophetic accuracy. The 2019 excavation of a 2,700-year-old seal impression mentioning Nathan Melech, servant of the king, a figure mentioned in 2 Kings 23:11, proves biblical historical reliability extends to minor characters. Each discovery reinforces confidence in prophetic literature's historical foundation. The cumulative effect is overwhelming. Archaeological evidence consistently confirms Ezekiel's intimate knowledge of ancient Israel. This archaeological validation strengthens confidence in his prophetic claims about restoration. A prophet accurate about verifiable historical details proves trustworthy regarding future predictions that have now been fulfilled with documented precision. The precise fulfillment of Ezekiel 37 transforms how we must evaluate prophetic literature. This isn't vague prediction that could be interpreted multiple ways. It's specific, detailed, and documentarily verified. The statistical probability of accurately predicting a nation's restoration after 2,500 years of non-existence approaches mathematical impossibility, forcing serious consideration of supernatural foresight. Dr. Peter Stoner, mathematician and astronomer at Westmont College, calculated probability scenarios for biblical prophecy fulfillment. His analysis of just 8 messianic prophecies yielded odds of 1 in 1017, essentially impossible without divine inspiration. Ezekiel 37's complexity, involving geography, timing, demographics, politics, and cultural preservation across millennia, suggests even more astronomical odds against natural fulfillment. The implications extend beyond religious belief into philosophy of knowledge. If humans can accurately predict specific historical outcomes across millennia, it challenges materialist assumptions about causation and knowledge transmission. Modern quantum physics suggests information can transcend linear time through quantum entanglement and non-locality. Perhaps prophetic knowledge operates through similar transcendent information systems. Historical methodology must grapple with prophetic literature as potentially legitimate historical source material. Dr. Kenneth Kitchen of University of Liverpool, Egyptologist and ancient historian, argues that prophetic texts with verified fulfillments deserve consideration as historical documents. The precision of Ezekiel 37's fulfillment suggests prophetic literature contains historically reliable information about future events. The geopolitical implications are profound. If Ezekiel's restoration prophecy has been fulfilled with documented accuracy, his subsequent prophecies about Israel's role in world affairs demand serious analysis. Modern Middle East policy discussions that ignore prophetic frameworks may be missing crucial analytical dimensions. Whether one accepts supernatural inspiration or not, the statistical accuracy requires acknowledgement. For individuals studying predictive systems, whether statistical modeling, trend analysis, or futures research, Ezekiel 37 provides a case study in long-term accuracy that exceeds contemporary methodologies. Understanding how ancient prophetic knowledge achieved precision might inform modern predictive techniques. The integration of spiritual and rational analytical frameworks could enhance forecasting capabilities. The theological implications are equally significant. Ezekiel's accuracy about restoration prophecy validates the possibility of supernatural communication across time. This doesn't prove specific religious doctrines, but it confirms that prophetic knowledge systems can produce verifiable results. The intersection of faith and empirical evidence reaches demonstrable synthesis in documented prophetic fulfillment. The future implications are most intriguing. If Ezekiel accurately predicted Israel's restoration, his subsequent prophecies about Israel's spiritual revival, regional conflicts, and global transformation merit careful study. Whether interpreted through religious or analytical frameworks, these prophetic scenarios could provide insights into developing historical trends. The dry bones have lived. What comes next deserves our attention.